It's December 14th, 2023 in Broomfield, Colorado, where an officer responds to a home for a wellness check after a husband, get this, said he grew concerned over his wife's not responding to a text.
Hello.
Oh, I'm their neighbor, and they called me. They're like, can you go see if she'll answer the
Oh, yeah, he sent us as well, so.
Yeah, I'm like, I live in the house.
Just next door? Okay.
All right, well, you got this.
All righty, man. Appreciate it.
The officer finds a neighbor at the door, who investigators would later learn was called by the same man to check on his spouse.
The door had been forced. At least, that's what it looked like. Inside, a home had been turned over, drawers pulled from their tracks, surfaces cleared. The physical vocabulary of a burglary furniture out of place. The telling disarray of a space that someone had moved through quickly, looking for something worth taking. Deputies from R arrived at a scene that made a specific kind of immediate sense. A home broken into, victims inside, a story already written, waiting for them in every overturned object and forced lock. Investigators see a lot of things in this work. They see violence, and they see grief, and they see the aftermath of decisions made in moments that cannot be walked back. What they also see, if they've been doing this long enough, is when a room is performing for them, when a space has been arranged, when what looks like chaos has been authored. Kelly McCollum and Matthew Shanerock were dead. 2 people in a home in Brevard County, Florida in 2024. Gone. And someone who had been in that house, who had stood in those rooms, had done everything they could think of to make sure investigators looked anywhere but at them. The problem with staging a crime scene is that you are, in essence, writing fiction inside a room full of facts. Every object becomes a sentence. Every forced lock, a word. Every deliberate detail, part of a paragraph that someone constructed before the bodies were cold. The best investigators are, at their core, editors, trained to find the sentence that doesn't belong, the detail that's slightly too deliberate, the wound that doesn't match the weapon, the entry point that tells a different story than the one being offered. In Brevard County, in 2024, they found more than one. Stay with me. Before this house became a crime scene, it was a home. And before Kelly McCollum and Matthew Shanerock became names in a case file, before they became victims in a story that would outlast them, they were people. Specific, particular, irreplaceable people with the full weight of lived experience that no case summary can carry. Kelly McCollum had the kinds of qualities that people reach for when they're trying to explain someone who is gone. She was someone with routines and preferences and the specific texture of a life in progress. Someone who had things she was working toward, people she was close to, mornings that looked like other mornings. Matthew Shanerock. Together, they shared, by all accounts, their life in the weeks before looked the way most lives do, from the outside, continuous, ordinary, ongoing. Before we go any further, if you're someone who needs to understand why people do the things they do, you're exactly where you should be. This is the Malice Mind. Subscribe if you haven't already. Now, back to Kelly and Matthew. There was nothing in those ordinary days that marked what was coming. No visible fracture, no obvious threat, just the life they were living, moving forward the way lives do until it stopped. What I want you to hold on to as this story turns in the direction it is about to turn is this. Kelly McCollum and Matthew Shanerock were not abstractions. They were not case numbers or tragedy categories or cautionary details in someone else's story. They were people who deserve to keep living. That fact deserves to be said plainly, and it deserves to be said here while there is still warmth in this story, because the warmth is about to leave.
He broke into the house and I didn't have time to grab the phone, so I...
Do you know who the man is?
No, I don't know who it was.
Is he still in there?
I don't think so. I waited. I hid in my room for like a really long time. I don't even know how long it's been.
Okay, you're not sure how long it's been?
I'm not sure.
What did he look like?
It's hard to remember, but I think he had, like, I don't know, like, he was normal height, I guess. If I had to guess, maybe like 5'8", I don't know. And
is he black, white, Hispanic?
I'm not sure. I think I didn't really look that good. I only got like...
What did he do once he got into your house?
Well, it was... I don't think the door was locked, but I don't think he knew that there was a hammer by the back. And,
was it your hammer, or did they bring it with them?
it was just the house hammer. It was just by the back.
Never know.
It was just by the back. And they grabbed... I think they got the sound. They grabbed it and broke in the window.
They broke the window with a hammer that you already had in your yard?
Yeah, with the glass.
Okay, take a deep breath. You haven't heard them in a while, right?
Oh,
Was there only one person that you saw?
that I saw, yeah, there was one person.
Okay, and where are you in the house right now?
I'm just in the living room.
Okay, we already have help on the way, so just take a deep breath, okay?
My mom, I think, I heard...
We have officers coming. Hey, take a deep breath. The people that you're hearing, we have 2 officers there, okay? They'll usually check outside first, so you might see flashlights. They'll probably come to the door and knock here in a little bit. It's okay. You still have your dogs with you?
They're just still in my room. I didn't let them out because I didn't want them getting blood all over their paws.
Right. Well, did you say blood all over their paws?
Yeah, because...
Is there blood inside your house?
Yes.
Whose blood is it? Is it your blood, or is it the person who broke in blood? Are you injured?
No, I'm fine.
You're fine?
No,
So
I'm fine.
it's the person who broke in. It's their blood? Where is it at?
No, I don't know if it's their blood or not, but I don't think it's theirs. It's my mom. From what I heard when I was hiding in my room, I couldn't afford her. It's all my fault. If I had been able to grab the phone, then...
No, nothing is your fault. If someone broke into your house...
On the 7th of July, 2024, in Palm Bay, Brevard County, Florida, a 911 call came in. It wasn't made by a neighbor or a passerby. It came from 16-year-old Julia Egler herself. Speaking in an emotional, panicked voice, Julia told the dispatcher that an unknown man had broken into the home through the rear sliding glass door. She claimed she had hidden inside her bedroom with her 2 dogs while the intruder ransacked the house. She said her mother, Kelly McCollum, and her mother's boyfriend, Matthew Shanerock, had been out shopping and had returned home during the break-in. According to her account, she heard screaming, multiple gunshots, and then silence, before eventually discovering the bodies. The report, as it was received, described what appeared to be a violent home invasion in progress. What deputies found when they arrived was far worse. Kelly McCollum and Matthew Shanerock were dead inside the residence. According to investigators, both victims had been shot multiple times, and Matthew Shanerock had also suffered multiple stab wounds. Detectives would later allege that these injuries were inflicted during the same attack before Julia placed the 911 call. At first glance, the scene carried the visible signs of a burglary that had turned deadly. But investigators quickly began noticing details that refused to fit together. Among the earliest inconsistencies were bloody footprints whose tread matched the shoes Julia was wearing, a .38 caliber revolver recovered beneath her bedroom window, and a bloody knife located near a bathroom window. Detectives also observed that broken glass from the shattered rear sliding door rested on top of Kelly McCollum's body and other evidence, indicating the door had likely been broken after the killings rather than before them. Those physical findings contradicted the timeline Julia had described during her 911 call and her initial interview with officers. The responding officers secured the perimeter. Crime scene investigators began their slow, methodical work photographs first, then measurements, then the careful collection of every fragment that might eventually explain what had happened inside the house. For the people who knew Kelly and Matthew, the news arrived without warning. No verified public statements from immediate family describing their first reactions have been widely released, and investigators have largely kept those private. What is documented is simply that 2 lives had ended suddenly, leaving relatives and friends to confront a loss that no explanation could immediately soften. As the Florida sun climbed higher over Brevard County that morning, detectives stood inside a home that seemed determined to tell them one story. Their task was to determine whether that story had actually happened, or whether someone had carefully written it for them. The answer, when it came, would overturn almost every assumption the original 911 call had invited. The working theory, the theory that the staging was designed to produce, was a burglary turned deadly, a home invasion, strangers, randomness. The kind of crime that investigators know is possible because it happens, and so they cannot dismiss it out of hand simply because something feels wrong. A staged scene, if executed carefully, does exactly what it's meant to do. It forces investigators to work through the performance before they can see past it. It costs time. It costs resources. And in some cases, in the cases that staging is designed for it, costs investigators the window in which decisive action is still possible. The early phase of this investigation moved through the necessary procedural steps. The surrounding area was canvassed. Surveillance footage was reviewed. Physical evidence was collected from the scene and submitted for analysis. And investigators pursued the leads that a staged burglary is designed to generate. What began to shift the investigation wasn't a single dramatic revelation. It was the slow accumulation of inconsistencies, the details that didn't account for themselves properly when placed against the physical evidence, the timeline, and the nature of the crime itself. Experienced investigators will tell you that staged scenes almost always leave seams. The staging is planned, but the planning has limits. It can't account for every variable. It can't anticipate every analytical lens that will be turned on it. And it cannot, ultimately, rewrite physics or forensic science. Meanwhile, the family of Kelly McCollum and Matthew Shanerock lived in the specific torment of grief without resolution, knowing that someone had done this, not knowing who. The community processed the news the way communities process the incomprehensible, with the candlelight vigils, or quiet tributes, or the kind of collective disbelief that settles over a neighborhood when something like this reveals itself to be possible there. Investigators, through this period, were building something, not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily, the way you build a case when you know what you're looking for before you can fully name who gave it to you. Phone records. Digital data. The circle of inquiry was narrowing, and when it had narrowed sufficiently, when the process of elimination and evidence analysis had done what it is designed to do, investigators arrived at a name: Julia Egler, also known as Jasper. The emergence of that name didn't mean the case was closed. It meant the investigation had found its direction, and the difference between a name and a conviction is where the real work begins. At this stage, investigators had a person of interest. What they needed was a case that could stand up to scrutiny in an interrogation room, and eventually in a courtroom. They were close. But it isn't finished. The breakthrough did not come from a single dramatic discovery. It came from the accumulation of physical evidence that repeatedly contradicted Julia Egler's account of a home invasion. Detectives began by comparing the story Julia told during her 911 call and subsequent interviews with the evidence inside the house. Almost immediately, inconsistencies emerged. Investigators documented bloody shoe impressions throughout the residence that matched the shoes Julia was wearing when deputies arrived. They recovered a .38 caliber revolver beneath the window of Julia's bedroom and a bloody knife near a bathroom window. Both appeared to have been deliberately placed rather than abandoned during a struggle. Perhaps most significant was the condition of the rear sliding glass door. Julia had reported that an unknown intruder entered by shattering the glass before attacking the victims. But crime scene investigators found that fragments of broken glass rested on top of Kelly McCollum's body and on blood evidence already present inside the home. The sequence mattered. It indicated the glass had been broken after the killings, not before, making it inconsistent with the burglary narrative presented in the 911 call. Each finding reinforced the others. The shoe impressions placed Julia throughout the bloody crime scene. The placement of the firearm and knife suggested an attempt to redirect investigators. The broken glass demonstrated that the supposed point of forced entry had almost certainly been staged after the victims were already dead. Individually, each inconsistency invited questions. Together, they dismantled the story. This is the moment in investigations like this when deception begins to collapse under the weight of physical evidence. Crime scenes preserve chronology in ways people often cannot anticipate. Blood dries. Glass falls in sequence. Footwear leaves patterns. The scene itself becomes a witness. Investigators also noted additional corroborating evidence, including Julia's changing statements during interviews and the absence of physical evidence supporting the presence of an unknown intruder. As detectives reconstructed the timeline, every major forensic finding aligned with a staged crime scene rather than a home invasion. On the 10th of July, 2024, Palm Bay Police Department detectives arrested Julia Egler in Palm Bay, Florida. She was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree premeditated murder in the deaths of Kelly McCollum and Matthew Shanerock. Those charges were announced at the time of her arrest. According to investigators, Julia did not confess. Publicly released records indicate she maintained versions of her original account during questioning before detectives presented the evidence they had collected. law enforcement has not released any documented public statement from Julia following her arrest beyond what is contained in investigative records. For the investigators, who had spent 3 days building the case from the killings on July 7 until the arrest on July 10, the arrest represented the culmination of a methodical forensic investigation. The staging had not been careless. It had been deliberate, designed to delay suspicion and create the appearance of an outside attacker. It had not been enough. For the family of Kelly McCollum and Matthew Shanerock, the arrest could not undo what had happened. What it provided was certainty. The violence inside that home had not been random. It had not been the work of a stranger who disappeared into the night. Investigators believed it had been planned, and the person they alleged was responsible was now in custody, facing 2 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom would become the next chapter. And in Brevard County, Florida, that chapter was only beginning. To understand this case, not just document it, but understand it, you have to begin with a question that the evidence raises and that the courtroom will not fully answer. Not who. We know who. Not even what. The crime itself is documented. The question is, what kind of mind decides to do this? And more specifically, what does the decision to stage a crime scene tell us about the psychology behind it? A staged crime scene is not, at its foundation, an act of desperation. Desperation produces disorganized scenes, bodies abandoned, evidence left in plain sight, flight without planning. What we observe in this case, if the allegations are accurate, is something structurally different, a deliberate, premeditated attempt to construct a false narrative and present it to investigators as reality. In the FBI's organized versus disorganized offender framework, a classification system developed through decades of behavioral science research, the presence of staging is one of the clearest markers of an organized offender profile. The organized offender plans, controls the crime environment, takes deliberate steps to obscure evidence, and, critically, remains composed enough after the act to manage the aftermath as a separate operation, one requiring its own preparation. This is a specific cognitive capacity, and it is worth being precise about what it requires: the ability to project forward from the moment of the crime, to anticipate investigative procedures, to construct a deceptive narrative, and to maintain that narrative under pressure. That is not the behavior of someone who lost control. It is the behavior of someone who believed they had control, including control over what investigators would and would not see. That belief, the conviction that one can write a story and have others read it as written, is consistent with what the Hare Psychopathy Checklist Revised describes as a grandiose sense of self-worth. Not simply confidence, something more specific. The belief that one's own intelligence or calculation places them beyond the reach of consequences that apply to others. The Dark Triad framework gives us 3 converging traits worth examining here. The narcissistic dimension, a sense of entitlement that places one's own needs, whatever need this crime was serving, above the lives of the people in that home. The social contract in a narcissistically organized mind is not a genuine constraint. It is something others observe while the exceptional person negotiates their own relationship to it. The Machiavellian dimension, the willingness to treat other people instrumentally as variables in a problem to be solved, rather than as human beings with intrinsic value. The staging itself is the most explicit expression of this. The victims' deaths were, in this reading, a problem that required a solution. The solution was a carefully arranged room. The psychopathic dimension, and here I want to be precise, because psychopathy is a spectrum and a clinical concept that popular culture has significantly distorted, refers specifically to the emotional architecture required to plan, execute, and survive something that the vast majority of human beings could not contemplate without psychological collapse. The absence of the emotional response that normally prevents such acts. Not a dramatic absence, a functional one. There is also a dimension worth naming that is less often discussed: the function of staging as a psychological mechanism for the perpetrator, not only as an investigative misdirection. When someone stages a crime scene to look like a burglary, they are not only constructing a story for investigators, they are, in some cases, constructing a story for themselves. The false narrative is not exclusively external. The insertion of an imagined stranger into the crime, the act of authoring randomness into what was, in reality, a deliberate and personal act, may serve as a form of psychological distance, a way of separating oneself from the act in one's own internal experience. This is what forensic psychologists refer to when they discuss cognitive dissonance management in perpetrators who continue to function after a crime. The mind, in some configurations, will protect itself from the full weight of what it has done. What the analysis of cases like this consistently reveals is the gap between external presentation and internal reality. A perpetrator capable of staging is, almost by definition, capable of appearing ordinary, of responding to questions, of performing the expected emotional registers, of being from the outside unreadable. That is perhaps the most consequential thing to understand about organized offenders of this profile. The danger was not visible until after the fact. As of this video, the case against Julia Egler is ongoing. The full legal reckoning for what allegedly happened in Brevard County, Florida, in 2024 is still being decided in a courtroom. But the lives of McCollum and Matthew Shanerock have already been decided. They ended before they were supposed to, and no verdict, no matter how, just reverses that. McCollum existed. She had weight and specificity, and a future that was taken from her. Matthew Shanerock existed the same way. They were not symbols or cautionary details or abstract reminders of anything. They were people, living forward until they weren't. The question this case leaves behind, the one a jury cannot fully answer, is about visibility, about how well we actually see the people closest to us, about the gap between a person's surface and their interior, and how wide that gap can be without ever becoming legible. Most people who knew Julia Egler did not see this coming. That is not a failure of perception. It is a fact about what organized calculation, concealed beneath ordinary presentation, can look like from the outside. Cases like Kelly and Matthew's remind us that behind every headline is a life that existed fully, completely, specifically, right up until someone decided it shouldn't. If that thought follows you out of this video, it should. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if the Malice Mind is where you come to sit with the darkest and most difficult questions about what human beings are capable of, subscribe. We're just getting started.